Hey, who's coming with Steve, Jen, and me on the 80s cruise next year? The 2019 voyage features host Dee Snider and performances by Kenny Loggins, Berlin, Sheila E., OMD, The Fix, Cutting Crew, Grandmaster Flash, English Beat, Starship, and more. It's all happening March 2nd through the 9th on the Celebrity Infinity. Join us for a 7-day trip back in time while we sail the Western Caribbean. Go to www.the80scruise.com to book. But remember to use the promo code STUCK to save hundreds off listed prices. Steve, Jen, and I will be on the ship to host Big 80s Trivia and record a live podcast. Book select cabins and get a free drink package, too. Seriously, you do not want to miss the 80s cruise. We never do. Now, on with the show.
Travel back in time to the 80s, reliving the shenanigans.
It was the early 80s, and sex was still a good way to meet new people.
The disappointment.
Now, that's a real shame when folks be throwing away a perfectly good white boy like that.
And the self-confidence.
I'm 6 foot, 3 inches tall, and maintain a very consistent panda bear shape.
Because just like you, we're stuck in the 80s.
Sure, it's not 1985 right now, but who knows what tomorrow will bring.
Hey, welcome to Stuck in the 80s. It's your host, Steve Spears.
And Brad in L.A.
And today we go back to the land before the 80s, the time of disco, the era of polyester shirts.
Do you mean the time we recorded a whole podcast about the music that started the 80s?
Yeah, that time.
The record.
Oh, the record.
Yeah, I thought it was a little too...
Too hip, maybe?
Stuck in the 80s is a member of the CLNS Podcast Network. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and the CLNS Media mobile app.
And don't forget to listen to our podcast at the CLNS Media website. You can find it at clnsmedia.com. On August 23rd, 2013, when I was merely a 67-year-old man.
Oh my gosh, so long ago.
Brad, Drew, and I had just gotten back from a Stuck in the 80s trip to Las Vegas to watch the Lost 80s live weekend show at Mandalay Bay.
On the beach at Mandalay Bay.
And I believe we had a very intoxicating breakfast that morning consisting of...
oh my gosh. I believe that was the morning I wanted to die.
Yeah. I think we talk about it. But we had an interesting email waiting for us when we got back.
From Alexander Stix Cardoso Solis in Tijuana, Mexico. He asked us what songs we thought were the ones that started the 80s sound and ended the 80s sound. So not the literal first song and last song, because anyone can look that up, but like what we thought kicked it off.
Right. So not literally the first song on January 1st, 1980, or the last song on December 31st. So 5 years ago,
Gosh,
we did a show.
That long? Wow.
5 years ago, we did a show, episode 292, about the songs that got people's attention back then. And I would say the late 70s, but that wasn't always the case.
So, no, I mean, that's kind of the leading contender for where we're going to pick songs from, but there were some from a little earlier.
So we're going to play that podcast for you again today because we really enjoy it, and because I'm still sick as a dog. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm hopped up on cough meds, and if I can make it 10 more minutes in the show, that would be fantastic.
Woohoo!
But in the meantime, I got to ask Brad, I mean, since it's been 5 years, have you heard any new songs, or have you thought of any new songs since recording this original podcast that you wish we'd covered?
You know, when David Bowie passed away, I was like, I should have gone with some of his stuff, or the kind of the songs that kicked it off. There's so much of his catalog that when I hear it, I think it's an 80s song, and then I found out it wasn't. Like Young Americans, Suffragette City, those songs just, they feel so 80s to me.
We could have done like a series of 5 podcasts on Bowie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We haven't, because I always felt like that was like handling a stick of dynamite. There was just no way we were going to be able to pull that off without blowing off a couple of fingers.
Well, and he's such a chameleon. He changes so much from album to album, which is great.
And I'm not a music historian, and I think you need someone like that to pull off a proper Bowie podcast.
Yeah.
I went back and started looking through my collection of CDs, which I still have but never play. And it's true. I've got like 400.
Do you rip them? Do you listen to them on your computer, or do you just not listen to music?
No. I listen to a lot of podcasts now because my commute to work is so long. I have to drive an hour each way. So I listen
Welcome to my world, friend.
I know. I got to tell you, the first few weeks of that was awful, but I kind of got used to it. And what really helped was listening. I was listening to music all the time, and it was just driving me crazy. And now it's podcasts. I just listen to podcasts the whole time. Not ours, because that would make me want to drive off the road.
Aim higher, Steve. Aim higher.
A lot of Mark Maron. A lot of WTF.
Sure.
But when I look through my CDs and I try to remember what I was listening to back in the 80s, it was the Velvet Underground. I have the Nico album. I think I have like 5 copies of the Nico album from 1967.
Oh my gosh, that's as old as we are.
1967. It is exactly as old as we are. And also the Sex Pistols, obviously. You know, and God Save the Queen, Anarchy in the UK, Pretty Vacant, all from 1976. So those are the albums that I think maybe we've glossed over those in this episode. I think maybe we thought we were going to do a series of podcasts on sounds.
Well, we did our picks, and then we had listener picks, and then we did that again for end of the 80s. Those are fun shows. And, you know, of course I think they're fun because it's kind of a wonky topic and you have to define your terms and then like defend your turf.
Right. You can't be technically wrong. It's your opinion.
Exactly.
Oh my God. There are some things you can be wrong about, my friend. And that's a topic like getting old. And Stuck in the 80s is here, and proud to tell you that we have a new partner called HIMS, HIMS. It's a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and sexual wellness for men. If you're like most guys, you hate going to the doctor, and you know this shtick by now. Every 6 months or 3 or 4 months, I come on the show and I talk about how much my doctor's happy with my numbers because, you know, I've gotten my cholesterol, my blood sugar under control. Yeah, but I got a long way to go. I mean, anyone who's met me lately kind of looks at me and says, "How you doing, Steve? You doing okay?" But that's where forhims.com comes in. You go to the website any time of day from the privacy of your own home, Joel. And you just answer a few quick questions about your hair issue or your problems in bed or the fact that you haven't had a date in 4 years. I don't know if they can help you with that last one, but if they could, trust me, if there's a pill for that, tell me about it. But so they give you a diagnosis. Products are shipped directly to your door. And, you know, I'm 50 years old. I don't have time, frankly, to go visit the doctor for every little goofy thing. I have to go every 3 months because, like everyone our age, we're on cholesterol meds. But that's enough. That's all I want to do. But I need help with other things. So forhims.com is what I do. Do yourself a favor. Try it out. You'll be helping us out. It's forhims.com. It's forhims.com/80s. So you go there, you'll get a free trial month of HIMS for just $5. You'll be saving yourself hundreds of dollars, plus all that time spent at the doctor's offices, plus all this time listening to me talk about my personal problems and my dating problems. That's forhims, forhims.com/80s. Anyway, you got the pills now. We got the podcast. Sit back and enjoy this blast from the past. Here's our sounds that started the 80s episode from August 2013.
I'm going to do all my shows in my bedroom naked. Oh, was I supposed to tell you that?
Oh, now it's ruined.
Please don't tell me now. Travel back in time to the 80s. Reliving the music.
You can't have the Pretenders' first album. That's mine.
I bought it.
You did not. The catchphrases.
Did you have a brain tumor for breakfast?
And the wannabes.
Sometimes I see you dance around the house in my underwear. Doesn't make me Madonna. Never will.
Because just like you, we're stuck in the 80s.
Can you say stuck in the 80s?
Oh, man, I hope I'm in the right place. You know, when Brad and Drew invited me out to L.A. for the weekend, it didn't give me a lot of time to get directions. Well, here goes.
Well, dynamite! Spearsy's finally here.
Far out, man. We just put on some killer vinyl, Spearsy. Come in here, kick off your hush puppies, and partake in some killer fondue.
Hush puppies? What the hell? Are you kidding me? Why are you listening to disco music?
Get off of my case, toilet face. Disco will never die. Look, man, even Kiss made a disco album.
Oh, man, I dig it. Gene Simmons is totally the next John Travolta.
Yeah.
He's the what? Have you lost your mind? Disco died 30 years ago, don't you remember?
What? Hey, sit on it, Spearsy. How's that? There's a phrase that'll never die.
Totally dead, Brad. Totally. Why don't you try something new? Something from, I don't know, the 80s?
What the hell is that machine? Some prop from Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Is 8-track tape suddenly too good for you, Spearsy? And now you're carrying around a bunch of hand mirrors?
CDs, Brad. They're CDs, okay? Shut up and listen.
I get it now.
It feels tubular. That's a good word, right? Tubular?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Everything's going to be all right now.
Let them lead you up in the air. Let them brush you rock and roll. And let the good times roll.
Hey, welcome to Stuck in the 80s. It's your host, Steve Spears, and today we're going to try something a little different. We have an entire podcast dedicated to one PPTMN question. But first, joining me as always, he's Brad from LA.
Hey, Steve. How's it going, man?
Excellent. I hear you made it back from Vegas in one piece.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a weird place, by which I mean I'm in a weird place. I'm kind of tucked in the corner of my house because we have guests this weekend, so I'm crammed in the corner of my bedroom recording this.
Well, we've got somebody else crammed in the corner because Drew from LA is also on the line.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me back.
Excellent. So the three amigos from Las Vegas.
Yeah.
That was a great time out there.
Oh, yeah. I think the Sage Fried Chicken Eggs Benedict has finally left the system.
I swallowed a lot of aggression, along with a lot of pizzas. Pizzas.
So we gather here today because a few months ago we had a very interesting email from Alex Stick Cardoso Solis from Tijuana, Mexico. He submitted a PPTMN question, which for those people new to the show, or because we haven't done one of these in about 3 or 4 months, PPTMN is please tell me now, where anybody can email us at any time and ask us a question, and we promise to answer it.
Yeah, 80s related or not.
Right, and but he sent us a kind of a complicated one, but I thought it was good enough that we could turn it into a whole show. So Alex's question is, what song started music and ended music in the 1980s? Not the first and last number one song of the decade, but in our opinion, what song started the 80s music and what song ended 80s music?
What's your record for consecutive questions asked?
38.
So it's kind of a complicated topic, so we're going to tackle it in two pieces. Today we're just going to talk about songs that started the 80s, and in the future we'll do another show about songs that ended the 80s. But first, let me ask you each, let's talk about this idea for a second, make sure we're on the same page. The songs, or I'm going to say the sounds that started the 80s, what does this mean to each of you?
When I was looking at this question, and you and I were talking back and forth about it, I was looking for not necessarily the origin. Like, I think it's hard to track down. Like, here's this band in Idaho Falls that recorded this track in 1974 that no one's heard of. So it's kind of walking a line of finding stuff that's new, but that also was successful and had got some exposure in the whether it be over the radio or whatever, however you want to look at that. So I wasn't looking for something that was super obscure that was sounding like in the 80s. I was looking for something that was, that charted, that got people's attention, and that brought something new to the table that was different from what had been on the charts to that point.
For me, it's a little bit different because I'm a little bit younger than you guys. And while not a lot younger, it was right at that pivotal moment of my life where I was starting to get away from my parents' music and find my own music. So, 1979, when you start looking for these songs, that's when I started looking for the songs for this topic. I'm 11 years old. So I'm just getting out of like my parents' Elton John and Neil Diamond and stuff like that. I have nothing against those artists, but it was my chance to really find music that was different that I kind of discovered without having to go
stretch
through my
your
parents
wings
first.
a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So when I look at this question, I try to think back to the 70s, and I try to think back to the first time I heard music that was really different, that wasn't the soft FM sounds that we'd gotten used to. I look beyond the prog rock of that time. So I'm looking. Yeah. I'm not looking at Styx, although I think Styx had a contribution to it with their ballad "Babe." But I'm looking for something that I hear for the first time that just kind of blows my mind.
Crazy, insane, insane, crazy.
So we've each picked 2 songs, and we'll go through and we'll talk about them. I think we've got some obvious ones in there. I'm looking at you, Bradley, and then.
Hey, I'm sorry. The right answers are sometimes right there in front of you, Spears.
I know. And I think we've got. I'd like to think that we've also picked a couple that are maybe a little obscure, or ones that maybe weren't obvious picks.
Yeah.
So Drew, go first. Give us a song that you think started the '80s movement.
Well, for me, growing up here in Los Angeles, there was we've talked about this radio station KROQ, and that was really playing a lot of the alternative hits. And there was a DJ who would come on late Sunday nights. His name's Rodney Bingenheimer. Have you ever heard of him, Brad?
Yeah, Rodney on the Rock.
Yeah, Rodney on the Rock.
He broke more bands on the radio than you and I can count.
Yeah, I mean, he's responsible for really introducing America to like Duran Duran and Susie and the Banshees.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a documentary on him that's really good.
It's called The Mayor of Sunset Strip.
Yeah, exactly. It's worth a look.
It really is, and he's an unusual guy, and he has this really kind of soft, almost wimpy voice.
Yeah, kind of librarian voice.
Yeah. But he is just brilliant when it comes to discovering music. And so he was on like Sunday nights from like midnight to 2, and in the middle of the summer, like I said, I was starting to discover my own music, and I noticed that he was playing a lot of weird, unusual stuff, and I liked that kind of music. And he played this one from a group called the Two-Way Army, called Our Friends Electric.
So now I'm alone. Now I can think for myself about little deals and issues, things that I just don't understand. Like a white light at night, or a slow touch at times. I don't think I mean anything to you.
Now, of course, Two-Boy Army was disintegrated shortly after that, and it's just Gary Newman because he was the main guy. But when I heard that song, it just blew me away. It was so different than anything I'd ever heard. Even some of the songs and I knew some synthesizer songs, Dreamweaver, stuff like that. But this was
the Moog had been used here and there, but not that way.
Not that way, and it had such a cold, just kind of distant feel to it, and
that's a good description.
It was just amazing to me, and I think it was really my first introduction to kind of like goth, and it changed the way that I saw music at that point.
I like your description of cold and distant, because when I think of music at the beginning of the '80s and just pre-'80s, I mean, I can't describe it any better than that.
And it's funny because I saw an interview with him, and he talked about when he started performing, and he said the reason he got that persona of kind of the white face and standing there so stiff, he said what happened was he was really young when he did his first TV performance, and he got there and he had so much acne, they just slapped like an inch worth of makeup on his face.
Poor guy.
And then they thought his eyes looked too washed out, so they put black under his eyes. And he got up on the stage and he was just terrified, so he just kind of stood there. And it totally defined his persona for the next decade. But he said that really happened in about 15 minutes before he got on stage.
Wow.
It's amazing, like the little, happenstance, little, fate that intervenes at that time. People like Pat Benatar coming from a Halloween costume party, and that what she's wearing ends up becoming her signature look.
Her look.
Stuff like that is just, Mike Score from Flock of Seagulls, his hair is all messed up, and so someone just takes a hand and presses it down, and hence we see the Flock of Seagulls look.
My cousin actually had that haircut for a while.
Wow.
Yeah, all big choices.
Yeah, weird. So yeah, that's a good pick. I really like that, and definitely dark and distant. I mean, cold is what I think of when I think of the band that I'm going to offer up next, which is the Cars. And I still remember sitting around in my friend's bedroom, and at that time we were listening to a lot of Styx and Journey and stuff like that.
Sure.
And he's like, I've got this record that I think you'd like. And he puts it on, and it's the Cars' first album, released back in June 6, 1978. And it starts playing, and from the moment the first notes hit, I'm blown away by just how incredibly different it is, like nothing I've heard before. And you start to hear Good Time Roll, and it goes through, and it's 9 tracks in my mind of just total, pre-new wave perfection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
The album only peaks at number 18 on the charts, weirdly enough, but it stays on the charts for 139 weeks.
Wow. Oh, my God.
And, of course, my favorite song from this album is this one, Bye Bye Love.
It's one day sky. Always with some other guy. It's just a broken lullaby. Bye, bye, love. Bye, bye, love. Bye, bye, love. Bye, bye, love.
That was written by Rick Ocasek, but sung by the late, great Benjamin Orr. Never released as a single, but still one of my favorite songs of all time.
It wasn't really, because I guess it's just this album is so... I mean, it's a seminal album. I'm looking at the track list, and this is solid top to bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because you could... Like, I listen to that album, and I think, wow, every one of these songs is fantastic in its own right, and they could all be singles, but... Man, you put them together, and what a great album.
Yeah.
I'd say I know every word to every song on this. And it still baffles me. I remember when we started Stuck in the 80s 8 years ago, and we were thinking about shows to do, and we're doing our Name That 80s Tune. And I think I pulled a song from this album off for Name That 80s Tune. I got a lot of grief from people who knew better than me that this was 1978 and not 1980. But to me, it's so 80s. I mean, to me, it's like, January 1st, 1980. That it couldn't be more 80s than this.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is, when we talk about stuff that's the first song of the 80s, we're going to hit, just like we were talking about best songs of 1980. A lot of the stuff is in the late 70s, because that's kind of when it got rolling. That's when the tide started to turn a little bit.
Can I make an embarrassing admission?
We love those.
Oh, okay. So I buy my first car for $300. The car is literally 1 year younger than I am. It's a 1969 Oldsmobile Delta 88.
Oh, yeah.
And I get in the car, and I turn on, I start it up, the radio starts playing, and it's Let the Good Times Roll. Comes off the stereo.
That's not an embarrassing story. Does it get embarrassing?
What's embarrassing is that became a tradition with me. Whenever I bought a new car, I would have to find that, for the first part, it was the tape.
Right.
And then it became a CD, and I had to play that song whenever I first started that car and started going somewhere. And when I bought my last car, I actually brought the CD with me because I knew I was going to drive the car off the lot just so I could keep that tradition alive.
That's sweet. That's not embarrassing.
Nice. That's a nice touch.
Okay.
So, Steve, what was your first car?
It was a Mustang, a 1982 Mustang.
How much did you pay for it?
Well, my parents paid for it. So
one of those kids.
Yeah.
My mom had a Mustang growing up. It was her favorite memory. They just wanted me to have a car that wouldn't fall apart when I was driving it around. So I they paid probably whatever a brand new car cost back in 1982 or 3.
Nice.
But it was great.
Well, my first car was a 1972 Triumph Spitfire. I bought it from my neighbor for $200, and the way you could tell that someone else owned the car is I pushed it from in front of his house to in front of my house because it wasn't running when I bought it.
With the little cinder block behind the wheels.
Well, my car, the transmission finally went out, and I was at school. It was after a basketball game, and I had to drive home from school. The car would only go in reverse, so I had to drive home in reverse like 1.5 miles, 2 miles.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, Brad, I know I stole the cars from you, but surely you have an equally impressive...
Well, I'm bringing the big guns for my first one, and my first song that I think is the harbingers of change for the music that's going to come in the 1980s is by one of the great, and I mean absolutely great one-hit wonders of all time. It's My Sharona by The Knack. This is their first single. It was a number one hit. It went right to the top of the chart, sat there for 6 weeks, and was number one on the year-end charts for 1979. And if you look at that chart now, or later, or whenever, the rest of the top 25, I just stopped at 25. I'm sure the whole top 100 is like this. It's pretty much, it's all disco and soft rock, adult contemporary stuff. So this song is a shot across the bow of the music business, I think, and it showed that there's an eager appetite for something different than the heavy disco layered stuff and that kind of music.
I remember owning the album. I think I owned the single back then. You could still get a 45.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I bought the 45 from My Sharona, and then later bought the album. And it's a good album all the way through. I remember also liking, was it Good Girls Don't?
Yeah, that's their other hit. It's kind of interesting. This My Sharona goes to number 1. Good Girls Don't goes to, I think, number 11. And that's pretty much it for the Knack and the charts.
Whatever happened to them?
Well, they did, I think, 2 more albums, neither of which did very well, and then they broke up. They got back together. They had some reunion stuff happening in the early 2000s, but the lead singer died. Doug Fieger died in 2005, I think. He had several bouts of... I'm sorry, no, he died in 2010. But he had a couple rounds of cancer, a lot of health problems.
I do remember writing about that now. Yeah, I remember that song had a nice little comeback in the early 90s.
Well, it was on the Reality Bites soundtrack, so it recharged at that point.
And that was kind of a nice moment in that movie where that song comes on the radio at the gas station.
Yeah, they're at the Quickie Mart or whatever.
And they tell them to crank it up, and they sit around and dance to it for a while. That was kind of a nice moment.
Yeah,
but
so I think when you hear this song now, it's a straight ahead guitar rock song. It's very clean sound. There's no keyboard. It's just 2 guitars, bass and drums. But like I said, that there wasn't anything really like that on the charts. That clean, that just kind of straight ahead rock. And I think it opened things up a little bit in the music business.
Well, I think you could call it the very first power pop song. I mean, power pop is so 80s. To me,
I think you're right.
Power pop.
And I would
say, Cheap Trick, obviously that was their stuff too. And if you want to talk about a band, a single band that may have helped the transition from 70s to 80s, Cheap Trick might have been that band.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Although I will say this, I call this a rock song for one reason rather than a pop song. And any guesses what that one reason is?
Oh, because it's about having sex with underage women?
No, I think all rock songs are about that.
I have no idea.
Why it's because it has 2 guitar solos.
Huh. Really? That's your prerequisite?
Well, if it was a pop song, Drew, it would have 1 guitar solo that would be about 8 bars long, and then they would get back into the chorus.
You know how I know you're an engineer?
That's not engineering. That's music, Drew. Music. Music has forms. Music has shapes. One of the most common shapes is verse, chorus, break, verse, chorus. End.
Yes, I'm
okay.
Aware.
Jeez.
But only you would numerically split it up as to what makes a pop song.
That's what it is.
Oh God, Drew, just give us some more education here. Give us an actual.
I have one more tie-in I have to make about this song. Another guess where else you can find the cover of this song.
Cover of this song?
Yeah, this is a tie to our last, not our last podcast, 2 podcasts ago.
I was going to say, this doesn't have anything to do with like Kids Bop 49 or something, right?
No, it's also on Chipmunk Punk.
Oh. God, we have 2 letters today about Chipmunk Punk too. We really hit a nerve.
I know. It's crazy.
Who knew?
Anyway,
nice.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done lecturing you, Drew, on the forms of music.
Consider me lectured.
If you'd like to talk about fugues and concertos, we can do that in another podcast.
Yeah. Drew, take us away. Give us another song that defined the beginning of the 80s.
Well, for me, it's kind of funny because it bounces around. I'm gonna talk about kind of an album, but really the main song of the album. But it's The Cure's "Boys Don't Cry."
Boys
to me, was just such an unusual sound. Again, I mean, that's where I go for. I always go for these unusual things. That's why I like Oingo Boingo so much and early Depeche Mode. But here, Robert Smith's voice was so different than what I was used to hearing. Again, I'm coming right out of my parents' stuff, so it's, Barry Manilow and Neil Diamond didn't sound like this.
Yeah, no. No, yeah. They did not.
And it gave me such an insight, kind of like our friends Electric. It gave me such insight into what was coming up, and having K-Rock around where they played it a lot, and seeing him also, because there was times, it was before MTV, before we got MTV, but he looked different. He had makeup on. He was different. And again, being so young, it just opened my eyes into what was out there. Now, I'm seeing that it didn't really chart in America. It actually hit number 70 on the dance music club play stuff in 1980. So it wasn't like it was a big song, but it just was, it was different for me. And there was other stuff that was on that album that I really liked. There was Killing an Arab, which was, again, started off with that weird guitar riff. And then I had a teacher, it was like a year or two later, and we started reading, The Stranger, and that's when that song made more sense to me. Because at first I was like,
pretty cerebral for pop music. Oh yeah. We based this on a existentialist novel
by Albert Camus. You're like, what? So that was
I much
cool.
prefer The Plague to The Stranger personally, but that's just me.
Well, I was being forced to read The Stranger, so. At least that was how the teacher kind of introduced it to us and said, this is kind of a cool stuff because, look, the Cure did a song about it.
Let me tie this into something that the kids these days
exactly.
Like. I hear you guys love your disco.
Yep.
Oh, my God. So I think Boys Don't Cry would have done a lot better had it come out. If it was a 1983, 1984 song, that would have been a chart topper.
Yeah, but it was a little early. It was it actually was released in 79, but, it came to America really in 80.
Yeah. I mean, I would if you had told me before, or asked me, hey, what year? I would have said 82.
Yeah.
And that would have been a stretch. So, I mean, I don't think I listened to The Cure myself until, maybe 84, 85.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, and then they came
the singles that were on K-Rock I would have heard, but I wouldn't have gotten to the albums until later.
You guys are so lucky to have that. I mean, I hope you know that.
Oh, yeah.
Because for the vast majority of the country, we did not have cool radio stations. We had, album-oriented rock. We had top 40, we might have had, we had our country, we had our whatever else. We did not have anything like K-Rock. I mean, the only place we heard new wave music really was MTV.
Yeah. Or if you went out to a club.
Yeah, when I was 13 years old, that wasn't going to happen.
No, we had K-Rock, being able to tune into that and listen to, because unfortunately we had a lot of album-oriented rock stations out here. We had KMET, we had KLOS, so we had plenty of it. And that's what made K-Rock, and Kiss FM too. We also had that, which was top 40. But K-Rock was playing different stuff, and that was how they stood out.
And 91X. I don't know if you ever got 91X.
91X was a little south of us.
A little too far north, yeah. 91X, Steve, for your benefit, is a Baja California, Mexico station that broadcast alternative rock. And it was one of those things where you could kind of get it in the summer in Orange County, but in the winter, when it wasn't coming in.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
K-Rock played everything. I mean, it was B-52s, Wall of Voodoo, everybody. We got exposed to them through that station. It was great.
So lucky. For my second pick, I'm going to pick a song from 1975.
Whoa.
I don't think anyone here will recognize this. I could be wrong. It's from the band Roxy Music.
Oh.
And this is their fifth album, Siren. And the song is called Love is the Drug.
In store, love is the drug, and I need to score. Showing up, hit and run. Boy meets girl where the beat goes on. Stitched up tight, can't shake free. Love is the drug, got a hook on me. Oh, catch that buzz. Love is the drug I'm thinking of.
Does anyone recognize this song?
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
It's a great song.
I was only 6, so.
Well,
this is you would have come back to it.
Come on, I was 8.
I didn't listen to it when I was 1975 either. This is based on my vast education.
Yes,
years of study.
I'll give you that.
Yeah. So, "Love Is the Drug," off their 5th album, Siren, was a number 2 hit for Roxy Music in the UK, and it was also their first and still biggest hit in the United States. It reached number 30 in 1976. But if you ask any band from the late 70s through the late 80s from the UK for their earliest influence, they will all say Roxy Music.
Oh yeah,
Roxy,
yeah.
They were that is the foundation of all British music for at least 2 decades to follow. Every time I interview somebody, Psychedelic Furs, Duran Duran, Human League, Naked Eyes, all of them say, they just pour on the love for Roxy Music.
Well, and Brian Eno was in there, and Brian Eno did so much work with the bands that we all hold near and dear to our hearts from the 80s. I mean, he's a absolute, a star in the pantheon of 80s music.
Yeah.
It's got the unique bass line. I mean, I could have picked any song by Roxy Music, but this is the one that that you will hear from time to time if you pay attention during documentaries about 80s bands. The Depeche Mode documentary 101. There's a scene where Dave Gahan is singing while playing a pinball machine. He's singing "Love Is the Drug."
Oh my gosh!
Oh, wow.
Nile Rodgers of Chic has said that the bass line of their song is based on the bass line of "Love Is the Drug." You'll hear it over and over again. So much so that this has been tapped by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as one of the 500 songs that shaped rock and roll.
Wow! You mean I actually agree with something that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame did?
Every once in a while, that pile of bricks in Cleveland gets something right.
Well, even a blind squirrel finds the occasional nut.
Yeah. Is Roxy Music in the Hall of Fame?
Gosh, that's a good question. I don't think they are.
Doesn't matter.
I would almost consider it a badge of honor if they weren't at this point. But
it doesn't matter. I guess I've made my feelings clear on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
It's really sad because here in Orlando today they're playing Arena Bowl. The Arena Football Championship is here today.
Oh wow!
And Kiss is in town to promote the Arena Bowl. They played a huge concert last night, and next year there's you guys are getting Arena Football
team. It's a
called
Kiss
the Kiss
branded team.
Yeah.
Really? Well, you know what? That shouldn't surprise me. They put their brand to everything.
Right. Whatever. So all week on the radio, sports radio here, they've been talking about, does Kiss belong in the Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And I'm like, oh God, this tired old argument.
Yeah. Well, didn't they just put Rush in like last year or the year before?
Last year, yeah.
Yeah.
They got tired of all the death threats. Like,
Those
fine,
Canadians,
we'll do it.
Those Canadians know how to shoot a gun. So "Love Is the Drug." That's my contribution. A little bit of
that's a good pick.
Something maybe you hadn't heard, because in my mind, the seeds of the '80s they're planted that deep. In the mid '80s, in the mid '70s, you will find songs that will remind you of what you'll hear later on. So
yeah.
Brad, your chance to wrap it up here.
Okay, so I have one more choice here. My second pick is off of Blondie's 1978 release, Parallel Lines. I give you One Way or Another. Honestly, I could have picked almost anything off this album. I think like almost the whole thing was released as singles. It's just there's so much stuff on there. But I went with One Way or Another for a couple of reasons. The first one, Debbie Harry's vocal, she's angry. She's just all this in it. And it has this, it's got an edge to it that again is so different from how female vocalists were presenting at the time. The very, it's either the Anne Murray, adult contemporary stuff, or it was the disco, Donna Summer. So it just is another way forward here.
Yeah.
And even if you listen on this album, the album had Heart of Glass on it, which is a disco song, really.
Mm-hmm.
But
very much so, yeah.
Yeah, but this song is just like, Argh! And the music, it matches that. It's got that driving beat. It's got a really rough guitar sound. And I would never say that this is a punk album or that this is anything to do with being the first punk of anything, because it's not. I'm not even sure it's a punk song, but it's definitely an early sign of that influence showing up in pop music that's charting.
Yeah. That's funny. I would argue that it is. I think it's very much a punk song. I really do.
I think it has a lot. I think it has a lot of punk influence. I think it shows a lot of punk influence, but I don't think I'd call it a punk song.
I remember buying this 45, and I wore the hell out of this thing. And for me to buy a 45 was kind of a big deal because I'd only get to the record store, once a couple weeks. When
and we're on limited budgets at that point.
And
it's like, what am I making for my paper route?
Yeah, and I came home and immediately put it on my little record player, and I played this thing over, and I love this song.
Yeah. I mean, I won't give it punk, but it is absolutely new wave. It is absolutely a new wave hit.
All right.
I know we're fond of saying that disco dies in the 80s. I sometimes think that's not exactly true, and it's kind of a simple way of describing something. In my mind, disco evolves in the 80s. I mean, it becomes smarter. It disguises itself a little bit better. It becomes, I mean, Pet Shop Boys, Duran Duran. These are bands that are essentially playing a new brand.
Yeah, I mean, I think the club music stuff did stick around, and you could still find it.
It loses the label. Yeah, it's not disco anymore. It's more.
Becomes electronica or trance or whatever.
Nobody likes the term disco. It just became a dirty word. But essentially, and some of the effects of it go away. But for the most part, yeah, you're right.
You know what? I don't think. I mean, they went away, but they've definitely come back. The last, I'm sorry for breaking tradition here and talking about current bands, but Maroon 5's last album was so disco. I was shocked when I started listening. I'm like, I mean, it's good to listen to, but it's very disco.
Well, if we're talking about new stuff, if you've listened to the new Daft Punk is very 70s.
Yeah.
I really like it, but it is very 70s. And I think, I think the reason I like this is because they basically pointed it at me.
I've never listened to, as far as I know, a Daft Punk song or a Maroon 5 song. So
you have listened to a Daft Punk song because you've been to see the movie Tron Legacy.
I closed my ears. I don't know.
Conspiracy, don't make me come over there.
I'm not aware of them. I mean, I know who they are, but I haven't bought any new music in
30 years, 20 years.
I mean, I buy the new album by someone who is 40 years old, but I have not bought any Daft Punk, and I hope that trend continues. You know what other trend I hope continues?
The Seggies.
The magical refrain of Reader Mailbag. And thanks to our last show mentioning Chipmunk Punk, we got 2 letters specifically about that. Take it away, Brad.
Okay. Letter 1 from Jeffrey in Three Rivers, Michigan writes, Hey, Steve and Brad. When I heard you mention Chipmunk Punk on the 5 Best and 5 Lamest Songs of 1980 podcast, a scarring memory was dredged up in me. Oh, yeah, we're doing our work here, Steve. A scarring memory was dredged up in me that the Stuck in the 80s podcast listenership might find humorous and possibly relate to. I was 8 years old in 1980 and attending Westmore Elementary School in Lombard, Illinois. Anyone know where Lombard is?
No.
It is a suburb of Chicago. I had a great aunt that lived there.
Okay.
We had a weekly music class, and the teacher encouraged us to bring in our favorite record to share with the class. I'd yet to purchase my first record, so I begged my parents to let me buy one. I was hoping for something rock and roll, but being that my father was a pastor, the closest thing to a rock album he would let me buy was Chipmunk Punk, which, judging by the cover, I thought was, marginally cool. We bought the copy at our local Kmart. So finally, the day of music class arrives. As we lined up on the sidewalk outside the school, waiting for the front doors to open, I could hardly contain my enthusiasm. In my right hand, I was proudly holding my Chipmunk Punk record with the album cover out, showing the chipmunks looking oh so cool against the brick wall behind them, and my Pac-Man lunchbox in the other hand.
Oh, okay. Man. I'm living this right now.
I'm telling you, this is quite
I totally
a picture.
picture it. I can picture it.
Yeah, I'm there right now. Then I distinctly remember seeing kids holding the new AC/DC Back in Black album, smirking while they came up to me and made fun of my Chipmunk Punk record. Oof, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I hid the album in my locker and never took it to my music class. I came home that day humiliated. Still, it didn't stop me from rocking out to it at home, though, along with the only other non-Christian music album we had, the Carpenters' Close to You album. Oh.
Wow.
Oh, Jeffrey, you have issues. Just wanted to tell you I love the podcast. I look forward to each episode. Love the stories you share, as well as the great interviews. Forever stuck in the 80s with you, Jeffrey Kiefer, Three Rivers, Michigan.
Wow.
Great letter. Cause
yeah, that
honestly,
is great.
It's so cringing. You sit there, and because we've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not that there, but we know that.
Yeah.
We all had that moment where this thing I've got this is the shit. It's like, yeah, it turns out not so much.
That's so cool. Well, believe it or not, we actually had 2 letters about Chipmunk Punk. So go ahead and read us from Christine in Philly, right?
Okay. Yeah, letter 2 is, as Steve says, from Christine in Philly. Hi, Steve and Brad. It's funny, I've been listening to some older podcasts to make my workday pass a little quicker, and I recently listened to one where a listener asked if there was an album from your youth, I'm 44, that really changed the type of music you liked. Well, since I was about 11 or 12 in 1980, I remember listening to Chipmunk Punk and actually liking it. Mind you, up to this point, I had been subject to my parents' music, Linda Ronstadt, Barry Manilow, Kenny Rogers. You get the picture. So the type of music on Chipmunk Punk was a welcome addition, no matter how dorky it was at the time. Anyway, I cracked up when I thought how stupid it would sound if I admitted Chipmunk Punk was that album. You can imagine the spit take I did at work when Brad mentioned my coming-of-age music album. Thinking of Chipmunk Punk more than twice in a week was enough for me, although it did bring back some nice memories. Glad to be listening to your show. I still stand by love of the 80s, as sappy as it sounds. It was a great time to be young. Thanks, Christine in Philly.
You guys should really introduce Christine in Philly.
I know,
Jeffrey.
we need to get these people together so they can kind of, she can help him through that angst and see the goodness that's therein.
I'm starting to wonder if we should do a whole album on Chipmunk Punk.
I think we've probably hit all the high points at this point.
Okay, good. Because that was my second
I'll keep bringing
instinct.
it up as long as there's any kind of tangential reference. I'll keep mentioning
That's
it.
good. As always, you can send all your reader mailbag to sit80s@gmail.com or steveinthe80s@gmail.com or bradinthe80s@gmail.com.
What's happening, hot stuff?
By the sound of the gong, it must be time for Mystery Movie Moment. We will play a snippet of a movie from the 80s if you can get it right. Well, this week, or last week, whatever the case may be, the winner actually gets... we have a grand prize winner this time, right?
Something other than just Eternal Glory.
So we'll get to... So the winner, the grand prize, is a, Knight Rider ornament?
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
First, pay attention. Here was the clip from our last show.
You ever hear of a tuna?
Yes, that's Uncle Buck.
Uncle Buck.
I think I've used Uncle Buck
to admit,
a couple times.
I've never seen it.
What?
Really? No great loss.
Get out.
No great loss.
Yeah, it just kind of never hit my radar.
No, that's fine.
It's worth if you happen to be it's a Friday night, you're on your couch, and it happened to be on the channel you were on, falling on your eyeballs. That would be okay.
You had 2 broken legs and a broken arm and couldn't change the channel.
It's not that bad. I'm just saying it's not something that you should build up as the greatest movie ever. But if you stumbled across it and it was only 5 minutes in, watch it.
All right.
It's John Hughes Light. I mean, it's like it's watered down. It's like the Bud Light of John Hughes movies.
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie
John
you
Hughes.
watch because you like John Hughes, not because it's a good movie.
It's
It's
John
got
Candy,
all
though,
his-
isn't it?
Yeah,
Isn't
yeah.
he? Yeah, okay.
He's
But I didn't know
he's
John
good.
Hughes directed.
Oh, I don't know if he even directed. He wrote it.
Oh, okay.
It might have been Larry Hughes who directed it. I don't know.
Larry.
But anyway, we did have plenty of people who got it right. So who got the answers right, Brad?
So our correct answers this week include Hawkman64 from Port Huron. Anyone? Michigan. Sorry. Hawkman64 from Port Huron, Michigan. Chris from South Lyon. Marie Mueller. Troy from the Great White North. Gary Jungling. Or is it Youngling? John at Phoenix. Youngling. I don't know.
That'd be a great porn name, by the way.
Yeah. Sorry, Gary. John in Phoenix. Eric in Alpharetta, Georgia. Jonathan Thompson and Lisa Brown. Downtown Lisa Brown.
And the winner, the grand prize winner, we have determined by total random chance of the Knight Rider ornament is...
Come on down.
Eric in Alpharetta.
So, Eric, email me your info and I will get it sent out to you. That's bradinthe80s@gmail.com. BRADINTHE80s.
And by info, he just means your address. Don't get carried away.
Yes, just an address. A mailing address is fine. It can be a P.O. box.
I'm a Scorpio who likes long walks on the beach.
My name's Brad, and I'm a Taurus.
Pay attention. Here's this week's mystery clip.
God damn, your drunk tests are hard.
If you know it, email us at sit80s@gmail.com, steven80s@gmail.com, or bradin the80s@gmail.com. The mystical refrain that is Name That 80s Tune. Hey, it's our signature Seggy here on Stuck in the 80s. We will play a little piece of a song from the 80s, and if you can get it right, well, if you got it right this week, you won a Vacation Wagon Queen Family Truckster ornament, right?
That's right.
But first...
Wait, everyone does, or just there's a grand winner?
There's a winner, sorry.
Okay.
Not to get your hopes up.
Yeah, well, I just don't want you guys to be on the hook for...
I mean, I like you guys, but I got to feed my family, too.
Jeez. Anyway, pay attention. Here was last show's mystery clip.
Filled it up with bubbly wine.
That's Hilly Michaels, Calling All Girls.
There's only one treasure in all of the world I never could find, so I'm calling all girls. I'm calling all girls. Calling all girls. I'm calling all girls.
Yeah, and actually it's fairly easy because I actually had that on my blog that week as one of our...
If you'd been paying attention, yeah.
Yeah, all you have to do is read the blog, and sometimes we give it away. Brad, who were among the people who got the answer correct?
Our correct answerers include Rob Stroh, Scott in New Hampshire, the man known only as Rowan. Boy, we haven't heard from him in a while. Ken Ward, is that really you? Charles Kraus from Yorktown, Bill with 1L, Dan in McDonough, and Big Trouble in Little Kansas. Now, is that Big Trouble in Little Kansas and Lance Edens, or is Lance Edens Big Trouble in Little Kansas?
Lance is. They are synonymous.
Okay. Big Lance, Little Trouble, Kansas in Edens.
Wow. And the grand winner of the Vacation Wagon Queen Family Truckster ornament is...
Come on down.
Ken Ward.
Ken,
Excellent.
You know the drill. Send me your stuff, man.
You know, by the way, this is a good segue. There's actually a family in Georgia had the Queen Family Truckster.
Yeah, I saw that.
Recreated. They had it, they took it to a body shop. They took their Ford station wagon, took it to a body shop, had it all geared up to look just like the family truckster. Their last name actually is Griswold.
Is it? Oh,
is it really?
I don't know about that.
It's ordained then. It's as was written in the book.
But they actually drove it down here to Disney World last week.
I specifically ordered the sports wagon.
You think you hate it now?
Wait till you drive it.
Wait till we take you through Orlando traffic.
Oh.
You think it's beat up now after that movie? It'll be beat up for sure.
Roll 'em
anyway,
up.
Pay attention. Here's this week's mystery tune. If you know it, email us again at sit80s@gmail.com, steven80s@gmail.com, bradin80s@gmail.com, and then tune in next week to find out if you're a wiener. A long-lost friend, please tell me now. It's only appropriate that an entire show that gets based on one question should have a Seggy for PPTMN.
It's so self-referential and meta.
It's so meta. All of Stuck in Knees is so meta.
I know, that's what I love about it.
So this week the question comes from Alex in San Jose, who wants to know, when is the Katrina and the Waves podcast?
Wait, the other question was from an Alex, too. Now it's getting really meta.
That's very, very meta. Just kidding, Alex says. Quote, every time I hear the song Walking on Sunshine, it takes me back to spring of 1985, my 9th birthday when I got my first boombox. My 11-year-old sister and I would do a fake radio show. Didn't everyone? I don't remember doing that, but maybe.
Yeah.
No, never did.
You guys are dorks.
Sorry, just never did.
And I would record songs off the radio. Walking on Sunshine wasn't the first song I recorded. I think that was actually Toto's Africa, but the Katrina and the Waves tune sparks my fondest memory. So please tell me now, what was the first or most memorable song you remember recording off the radio? Alex in San Jose.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I can't remember a specific song, but I definitely remember doing this. I mean, I had my little radio that was in my room, and then my dad, who was an orchestra conductor, had, the hi-fi. And I would basically slip out there in the evenings when everyone was kind of going off to bed and tune the radio on that to my station and try and catch stuff and record it. And I'd basically just kind of be huddled over there in the corner hoping no one would come out and see me messing with his stuff. Because they'd be like, who changed the station on this? Oh, I don't know.
That's weird.
Nice. Well, I'm going to real quickly say that I can't stand that song, Katrina and the Waves, Walking on Sunshine, because for the longest time while I was editing like promotional stuff, everybody wanted that song. I hate that song. But what's odd is the thing that I remember most about recording off the radio, it wasn't a song, it was actually a program, but it was Dr. Demento. Do you guys remember Dr. Demento?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course.
And we used to record, because my dad really didn't want me staying up that late on a school night, and it was Sunday night, so I would hit play and record, and I record it, and then the next day I'd be able to listen to it. So it was Dr. Demento with like making love in the back of a Subaru and stuff like that, Fish Heads, all those that I distinctly remember playing.
Star Trekking.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, big time. And Weird Al, of course, made his big break on that show. You would have heard him. I can actually remember this. The same guy who introduced me to the Cars album that we talked about earlier, David Goodfield. I remember his name like it was yesterday. He and I sat up one night waiting for Foreigner's Urgent to come on the radio because we wanted to figure out the lyrics.
Didn't we we touched on this in the last show, didn't we?
So we sat there, and just waited and waited and waited. And sure enough, it came on. We recorded it. And then we spent like the next 3 hours trying to figure out what the words were. So I remember it well. To this day, I do not like that song anymore.
So was the argument, is it urgent or virgin?
Urgent.
Virgin.
Emergent.
Oh, my God. That whole album to me.
Sturgeon.
Remember we used to really mock Foreigner. Then we got like both Lou Gramm and Mick Jones on the show, and I felt really bad.
You mocked Foreigner?
Big time. Yeah.
I
love them now. Now they're great. If you ever get a chance to see them in concert, like no original stars, no original members anymore, except maybe sometimes Mick shows up. But for the most part, totally redone band, but they're amazing. Greatest cover band ever. If you have a PPTM question for us, email us. You know the addresses by now, but please put PPTMN in the subject line. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
This is Stratego, not a place, not a time, but a battle of wit and skill and strategy. Stratego, we're generals, field marshals, scouts and lieutenants. Miners and spies all conspire with bombs and brains to capture the enemy flag, to win the battle, to win the game. Get Stratego from Milton Bradley. Victory awaits you.
We're back. We have time for one last discussion. While you guys were researching this podcast topic, did you rediscover any other songs from the late 70s that you had forgotten about? Or do you want to talk about maybe some of your honorable mentions that didn't make the final cut?
Well, I'll just say, I'll keep it short because mine you guys actually picked. Blondie and My Sharona were two songs. I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize they came out that early.
Yeah.
And I, remembered them very well, being a big part of that changeover for me. So yeah, you guys picked the ones that I really would have had as an honorable mention.
Yeah, Steve and I, when we had this conversation like a month ago when we first got the question, I'm like, okay, it's My Sharona, it's something off of an early Blondie album, and it's something off of an early Cars album, and so but I also looking through things. The Talking Heads album, Fear of Music. It's like, wow, I forgot how much I like this. And the Police's first album.
Oh yeah, the Police.
I was very much leaning towards picking a Police song for this, like maybe So Lonely, or something else off of Outlandos d'Amour.
Yeah, I'm not a Police fan, so I wouldn't have picked any of their stuff. Some of the songs that I thought about, I swear I chose mine at the very last second, like literally 30 minutes before we went on. I narrowed it down. I had a couple songs by Joy Division.
Okay.
That had Level Tear Us Apart and Transmission.
Is that 70s?
Yep, very late 70s.
Wow.
So Joy Division would have...
Obviously that's a good choice if I didn't realize it was a 70s song.
Yeah. Also, the Buggles, Video Killed the Radio Star, 1979. I just thought that was too predictable.
Yeah.
Pop music, and I couldn't decide if pop music was the last song that sounded like the 70s, or the first song that sounded like the 80s. And so
it's
I was
a little novelty song-ish.
Yeah.
The other one that I was toying with, and this is just because I'm such a fanboy, was the Devo cover of Satisfaction. I just thought that was it's a different look on something that is such this, I guess this is true then too. It's this established rock band, and they took it and they're like, no, we're going to do that. We're going to do it totally differently. We're going to put this twist on it.
I'm surprised you didn't pick a Devo song. Are you holding out hope that we're going to do a whole show on them?
No, I you know what? I drew a box around what I wanted to be this, and I kind of talked about like what my qualifications were, and it needed to be something that got some exposure that people had heard. And, me calling out some obscure Devo song would have made me happy, and everyone else would be scratching their heads going, what is he talking about?
Didn't stop Steve with Roxy Music.
Well, but, Steve, and I can't make Steve live by my rules, man.
I still argue. I argue that song was very popular at the time, and it influenced everybody that came after them. It just... Does it stand out to the average 80s fan today? Probably not, but it should.
I think you're underselling it. I think people...
Respect your elders.
Okay, sorry. I think that's one of the things that surprised me, though, is when I was researching these songs, was how many of them I thought were true 80s songs, and they actually came out in 78, 79. That surprised me.
Yeah. It's important.
Yeah, well, you can see that change starting in the charts, but it takes a while to push through.
Right. Yep. It's important, and I don't think I learned this right away when we first started doing Stuck in the 80s. Back then, I used to have a real strict rule about we are not talking about anything that happened before or after. And so we would talk about bands like Depeche Mode, but we would like totally just the door would shut, at the end of 1989. And I think now I've kind of given up on that and realized that, hey, the 80s, what we know and love as the 80s began, several years beforehand and ended probably several years before the actual decade ended.
So does that mean we'll actually do the best covers of 80s songs eventually?
Oh, yeah. I've been thinking about that one for a long time.
The other thing that this made me kind of nostalgic for as I was doing the research was, for some reason, I stumbled across some website and I found that I really wanted to watch some old episodes of Fat Albert.
You're like school on vacation.
I wanted to learn a valuable lesson and watch some kids play Junkyard Band instruments.
Oh, man, I used to watch that every weekend.
Of course, we all did. That's why it was on every year, because people were watching it.
Cosby would come on with the lesson that we didn't quite learn until he spells it out.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Those are the good old days. Well, in the meantime, we'll start thinking about our next show. Well, I don't know that our next show will be the songs that end the 80s, because that's just kind of a downer, but we'll see.
We will get to it.
It'll happen. In the meantime, Bradley, and I can't quit calling you Bradley.
Okay.
I know it irritates you.
It's okay.
And I appreciate you putting up with it.
Thanks for good radio.
Brad and Drew, thanks for joining me as usual.
My pleasure.
I can't imagine doing this show without you. In the meantime, queue up some of these songs. Send us some emails with your ideas of songs that began the 80s, and maybe we'll have that little special seggy next show with your own suggestions.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
In the meantime, myself, Brad, Andrew, and Roxy Music, we remain here, hopelessly stuck in the 80s.
Stuck in the 80s is a Class of 85 production. Please listen responsibly.